It's all right. We got all day. It's all good.
We got all day. Okay.
Cool.
But we don't have all day because we only have 45 minutes to share what we could talk about literally all day. We're going to share about Wholesale. Now, Eddie and I are really, really close friends. We really enjoy each other's company.
Depends on the day, but okay. You can go with that. If you haven't seen our comedy act at ASD in Vegas, you should come and see that. It's just like this.
So, but we have completely different business models. They could not be farther. So I was sitting in his session being like, that's the opposite of what I teach. That's the opposite of what I teach. So what we're going to, because the reason we think it's so important for us to do it together, even though we have a very opposite business model, is that there is no one right way to do this. And that's good. Because if there was only one small path to wholesale success, that means the opportunity would be really small. We would all be stepping on each other, right? So what you're going to want to listen to is the overall strategy of how each of us work, and then look at your situation and your skill sets and start to figure out where in that spectrum you might be, right? So as you're starting to develop wholesale, how many of you are brand new to wholesale? How many of you are brand new to wholesale for the 8th time? We have some people they're like, start, not start, right? And so what we recommend is that you imitate before you innovate. So before you try to mix our two things together, that's a bad idea. You're going to be schizophrenic. So, start with one process, a proven process. It doesn't even have to be ours. There's other people that teach wholesale. Start with a process that you know works, get some results, and then you can fine-tune it for your business.
And you can pick and choose. We're going to go through our business as it relates to several different parts of it, whether it be sourcing or operations management or logistics, doesn't really matter. But you can pick, certain areas from my business that make sense and then certain areas from Robyn's, or vice versa. It doesn't matter. So don't think that you have to mold yourself into one specific model, but you can kind of flip-flop. So our it's playing.
No.
Oh, okay, fine.
I'm first.
You skipped the agenda.
We already said it.
Fine.
It's a good thing we're not married. We would just...
I worked very hard on that slide, okay? Found the easy button picture. Yeah?
Yeah. So that tells you that wholesale's not that hard if you worked hard on that slide, right?
I mean, that's fine. Go ahead. Go have your moment. Go ahead. I'll see.
All right, so my name is Robyn Johnson from Best from the Nest. I started out with $100. I was doing garage sales, and then I built it up to a 7-figure business in just 3 to 4 years. Now, I have the longer version of that story, but you didn't come to hear that. You came to hear about wholesale. I've had the pleasure of blogging for Search Engine Journal. I speak at several big SEO conferences like PubCon, Digital Summit Series. So I'm not just some Yahoo from the internet. I actually have, a lot of experience. We've been doing wholesale for about 5 years. And the method that we use is really geared towards people who don't have a lot of capital. Before I did this, I was a youth minister. And when you're a youth minister, they say the benefits are out of this world because the pay isn't. So I didn't have access to a lot of capital, like I sold my daughter's crib for more inventory. Now I bought her another ugly one off Craigslist, but she was too young to notice, so it was fine, right? So, we were kind of really bootstrapping what we were doing. So our model is for people who have capital but have limited capital, right? And the way that I do it is I try to focus on high ROI items. So, you'll hear people in every kind of method say, you can't get a certain high ROI at this method, right? It is possible, but just like in retail and online arbitrage, to find those higher ROI items in wholesale, you have to go through a lot of data, right? So you have to be willing to go through that data systematically. I have a book, I have a podcast, and you can find out more information at Best from the Nest. We're going to be relaunching the podcast again soon. And now it is your turn.
Finally, I was worried we run out of time. For those of you who heard my intro and went to my session yesterday, I apologize. This is going to be a duplicate. My name is Eddie Levine, president and co-founder of Wholesale Breakthrough. Started e-commerce when I was 13 back on eBay. I was an eBay power seller by the time I was 15. Built that into a six-figure operation, by the time I was 15 as well. My background comes from the hospitality, IT, and logistics industries, working for several Fortune 500 companies, which that experience has helped me tremendously with where I am today. I am multi-channel, very diverse in terms of my business. Today we operate on just 29 platforms as of last week, And so we're growing as we speak and continue to add more and more avenues to our business as much as possible to diversify. I'm a frequent traveler, traveling about 5 to 6 months per year to various conferences just like this one, as well as trade shows to source my product from, both domestically and internationally as well. Big on paying it forward, so I do a lot of volunteering experience, giving back to the community, teaching other people about what the tricks that I know that I've picked up from, some of the things that the pitfalls that I've experienced. Also working with some youth entrepreneurship groups as well. And I was just recently featured in Inc. magazine talking about the traits and characteristics of entrepreneurs and business owners.
So before we get started, one of the questions that some people might have is, if you're so good at this, why would you share with us? Because people might think that, right? And the reason is because we don't want you making us look bad. So educated sellers make the marketplace better. If we have a bunch of people who are trying to scan in booths and asking vendors, I've literally heard people do this, can I make money selling this? Don't ask that question. That's your job. That's not their job. So the more we can educate sellers and have people come in a way that works for vendors, the better we're all going to fare in the way that manufacturers look at us as potential purchasers.
So as Robyn mentioned before, our models are very different. They could not be the same in pretty much any way possible, but it's good because you can see both sides of the coin. For my specific model, the products I look for specifically can come from any category. There's very limited categories that I don't participate in, which includes things like HBA and jewelry. It's just categories that for me, I personally feel are a little bit more risky, and I don't want to take that under my wing necessarily. It's not to say they're bad categories, it's just for my model, they don't work well for me. We target the mid-tier and above brands. So what I mean by that is the brands that we target have the potential or are currently selling through the marketplaces at least $1 million per year. We're very brand focused in our wholesale business. We try to partner with the brands and to optimize their brands and their listings and really grow their presence in the marketplace today. It doesn't have to be $1 million the course of the year over on Amazon. It just has to be $1 million collectively on a variety of platforms. So some of the brands that we do market and work with on Amazon specifically are much smaller because they perform well on other platforms, actually better than Amazon. So brands that don't have a current e-commerce strategy, don't know where to turn, have made a mistake in the past, or have been having problems with controlling Amazon or e-commerce in general are ones that we target because we tend to have a pretty high rate of success in turning them around and getting them to have a positive experience on the platforms. If they're unhappy with their first party or Amazon direct vendor relationship, that's a good target for us as well. A lot of the brands go to Amazon and they start selling to them directly, thinking that it's the best option to sell their products, and they come to discover that there's a lot of problems with that. A lot of things they didn't realize that would have to be kind of handled and built out logistically, and there's a lot of fees involved with that and some hiccups all along the road. So brands of ours that aren't happy with that relationship, we tend to help them through that process as well. Our margin can vary greatly on the type of products that we do purchase from the brands that we work with. We've gone into the single digits for products that really turn and burn very fast. It's actually very good. So if it's a product that sells a lot of units, for example, we had a product last year that we were selling about 700 units a day. We're happy to take a smaller margin on it because the volume is there. Other products that don't sell as many units or are going to require a lot more work on our end will obviously need a larger margin requirement, but it's really dependent on the product and the brand that we're working with.
And none of us have rabies, and there are some seats in the front. So if you don't want to stand, come on forward. But now I know how the pastor felt on Sundays. Okay.
There's even 4 seats like in row 2 and 3, right here.
So how many of you guys know, when we say 1P, how many of you know what that means? How many of you are trying to figure out what 1P means? Okay, so there's Seller Central. All of us are familiar with Seller Central, right? Seller Central is where we ship as a third-party seller. So when people say 3P, they mean Amazon Seller Central, where we're selling as a reseller on the marketplace. 1P is when people sell directly to Amazon. So that's Vendor Central. So what they do is Amazon will send them an invite and they'll say, all right, I want 355 of this item. And they'll send 355. They don't have to pay storage. They get to get a wholesale price right up front. So it's a completely different arrangement, right? So a lot of companies that work in Vendor Central, there are some pitfalls. So like if I know I'm going to be on Dr. Oz, I can't say I need to send in extra because we know I have more. And there can be big price battles where Amazon will undercut the price and that hurts the brand. So sometimes people, where manufacturers are unhappy with that. So that's what when he says unhappy with 1P.
The other issue with 1P potentially is when a brand is selling first party to Amazon directly, and they also sell third party or to resellers such as yourself, and they do that together, that can create a lot of problems because Amazon selling the same product as a reseller usually doesn't play well in the same sandbox. It usually leads to a price war, and the brand suffers, as Robyn mentioned.
So I buy outside of what normal people would consider good buying criteria. So when I'm looking at wholesale, I might find a toy that's ranked 500,000 or even 1 million in toys, and I might make a wholesale purchase on that. Because what I'm looking at isn't just the sales rank. Now, in the beginning, when you first get started, you need that sales rank number to kind of give you an idea of the demand that's coming through. But as the way I look at it is there's kind of an inverse relationship. So the lower the sales rank, the more sellers a listing can tolerate. The higher the sales rank, the fewer sellers that I can tolerate, right? So I can be on the #1 ranking toy, and if there's 300 other sellers, I still am going to get a couple sales a day. Or if I'm at a higher sales rank, and if I'm the only FBA offer, I'm going to get all 6 of those sales. So sometimes my sell-through rate can actually be better, right? The other thing that I'm looking at is why is that sales rank where it is? Has it been out of stock? Is it priced well over MSRP? Does it not index for its name? Has it got a bad listing? Does it have cat poop in the picture? Yes, that has happened, And I was like, I think that might be hurting conversions, right? So sometimes we look at the listing and we'll look at things like the demand on merchant words for that brand and how saturated it is. So, we saw this item at ASD a long time ago. This is not a BOLO. This deal is dead. So don't go running off trying to buy these. So we found these tampon flasks. And there were little flasks, they were like test tubes that they put in tampon wrappers so people could smuggle alcohol into football games. And I was like, I'm a goody two-shoes, and I think this is funny. So we brought them to market because so I looked for there were things like shamboos and things like that, right? And so I was like, all right, there's a market for this. When I did merchant words, nobody was searching for their brand, but I knew that this alcohol concealment task kind of category was doing well. So we brought them to the marketplace, and it sold really, really well but if we looked at them now, there's 1 million products that are similar, right? So if somebody has a brand that's let's say a big brand what's a kitchen brand? Williams & Sonoma comes out with a garlic press. Yes, there is a lot of search volume for Williams & Sonoma. Do we need another garlic press on the Amazon marketplace? No, we don't. There's a joke about Amazon and garlic presses. If you're new to the industry, you'll get it later, right? So we kind of look at that saturation. So we look, why is the rank the way that it is? I look for high ROI. So I want at least a 60% ROI unless I'm going to be doing a consignment deal. So there's some companies where the margins just don't work. So because the reason I want that high ROI is because I don't have access to as much capital as Eddie does. And I don't want to. I don't feel as comfortable borrowing large sums of money, right? And so what we do is we want to make sure we're maximizing every dollar. So we're trying to get items that turn consistently, even though we might not sell 1,000 of something a month. We might sell, instead of having one product that does that, we might have 10 products that sell 100 a month, right? So we look at that because we want to best utilize the capital. But if I can sell it on consignment, where I say, you give me, usually anywhere from 10 to 25% of gross sales before Amazon fees, I'll manage your Amazon presence. And, we'll do that if we think that there's enough sales to justify that. The reason that works is because it's not tying up my capital, and usually I'm not handling any logistics.
Can I just make a quick point on this?
No.
Real quick? I'm going to do it anyway, so deal with it. The interesting thing part about this slide I want to stop for a second is Robyn mentioned that she is able to do consignment deals for a decent amount of her vendors, I assume. And there's something that I think is a key differentiator between our models, because Robyn can do that with a lot of her brands because of the size of the brands that they are. If I go to my brands, which are mid-tier and above, and I say, hey, I want to partner with you and I want to do this on consignment, in my experience with the brands that I work with, they're not going to be willing to do that because they're just a larger brand. There's a demand for their product already. So it's an important differentiator to realize that, size of the vendor also has a lot to do with what things you are able to do in terms of how you structure your payment arrangements or deal itself.
And so these aren't examples of like a brand, like he would look more like a brand like Hasbro, Mattel, Lego, and I'm looking more for like Plus Plus, Think Fun, Waba Fun, these little tiny companies, right? Right? So I'm looking for very small companies that are new to the market. When I talk at the end, I'm going to talk about product life cycle, and I'm going to mention Eddie and where we pick our products in different places and why we do that. So we go through a lot of data. So basically, we are like we're looking for the needles in the haystack. So, we constantly are searching through leads to find new products. And so my goal is to always be finding better deals. So in the beginning, you might settle for a 40% ROI, but then you should always be looking for new products that you can boot those other products, right? So you want to get more and more jaded. So you're like, well, this item turns 40%, but only, I can sell through this volume. Well, now this one sells the same amount, but same ROI, but I can sell more volume, or I can sell this at a higher ROI, and I can place orders that are only 30 days worth at a time, right? So we look at those kinds of things. And it was,
how much volume do you buy on a typical basis? Like if you're gonna buy inventory, how much stock in terms of into the future? How much would you buy? 30 days, 60 days, 90 days?
So we usually will buy 30 days. Now I usually buy the smallest test buy possible, which is opposite from Eddie. Eddie buys large trucks loads of things, right?
Usually, sometimes it's not. I mean, because we work with brands now, as opposed to just selling any wholesale product we could find, which is what we did in the first few years. If it's a newer product or if it's a brand that we haven't had a whole lot of experience with, we're not going to buy a ton of inventory. But if it's a good opportunity with a good amount of margin and we can save money by purchasing in that volume, we're going to do it.
So what would you say is your typical minimum opening order? And that is, we don't ask how little can I buy, because that does not sound like this, I'm going to be a great customer, right? This is not saying like I'm going to be a moneymaker for you. You say, what do you look for in a minimum opening order, and what do you look for in a reopen or in a reorder, right? Doesn't that sound better than what's the smallest I can pay today, right? Okay.
So I mean, I would say because the brands we work with are larger lines, if I analyze the brand and I really target the products that I think would sell well, which most of the times there's a decent amount, the minimum order, at least the first order we place with them, is at minimum $3,000 to $5,000. At minimum.
So there have been brands where I've ordered 6 wholesale. So
six units.
6 units. Yeah. So like I'll be like, well, I'll just take these ones right here, and I'll list them, and because I want to test. So the way we reorder is based off of not like projections and Jungle Scout. We look at, in the last 30 days, we sold 30. So now we're going to order 36, because that's the next number divisible by 12, right? And so we're going to replace what's sold, and if we're coming into a season, we'll do more. So we restock based off the data, right? So we'll carry 4 to 6 weeks of time. And then, so we'll look for, one of Eddie's advantages is his logistics. He has great logistics. I hate logistics. I had a warehouse for 3 or 4 years. I recently got rid of it. And I got to tell you, I don't miss her. She's like I could write a love song about how I'm fine that you're gone. She's like, so we use a prep center, and now we have some companies that we're doing that consignment deal with, that they send it in for us.
But if you have a warehouse, you can like pop bubbles and stuff.
Yeah, I can do that at my house. See, so I have a life.
And packing peanuts and stuff.
So I do more than pop bubbles at my house. I'm sorry.
And wrap pallets and shrink wrap. Anyway, have fun with whatever you do. Fine.
Okay, yeah.
And you guys want to wrap pallets, come on over.
Yeah, I have no desire to do that. So we look for niche products that even once they reach their highest point, they're going to stay under what private labelers and what Amazon Basics is going to look for as benchmarks for trying to do something. So I'm sure that if you talk to Rachel, and you should talk to Rachel because she's brilliant, she'll tell you that Amazon wants to see if they're going to invest in a product that's going to sell a certain amount, right? They want to know. So we want to be like, we're not a big deal. We're just going to stay right down here, right? And so sometimes if it's a consignment deal, we will grow that company, because that's usually part of our agreement with them. But if I'm buying straight wholesale, there'll be times where I'll raise the price to raise the rank intentionally, so it stays just outside of what other courses are teaching for the good rank of a product, right? Because I want to stay underneath. I've actually seen people walk up to one of my best vendors. They looked at the price list, they typed it up, they crumpled it up and threw it away. They're like, oh, the rank is garbage. I was like, I'm making $10,000 a month on that. So, like I try to stay under the radar. And so we we'll buy we have a wider SKU base that we have to maintain, but we buy shallower. So we only buy usually 4 to 6 weeks worth at a time.
Which vendor was that? I'm trying to figure out if I was that guy.
So my stepmom, I taught my stepmom to sell on Amazon, and you need to think twice before you teach your family of these things. But so she thinks, she'll say, I don't care, I want it to sell fast. So the person that reprices manually like every day, and you're like, what are you doing with your life? That is my stepmom. So we went to the fancy food show and we exchanged our trash, and we both ordered off each other's trash. Because I like items that have high ROIs that might move a little slower, and she wants things that are going to move instantly. So, we look for different products. She's a little bit more like Eddie.
I just have a question. Who here is not using a repricer that is doing the wholesale model, has like more than 50 SKUs?
All right, so we can skip that.
A few? Yeah? It's okay. Raise your hand. It's fine. Okay, so here's my advice to you, because I was in your shoes. So I'm just going to give you some advice. For the longest time, I operated my business with a very small amount of SKUs, at times under 50, because our original model was to buy very heavy in every SKU we bought. So we were doing the volume, not necessarily the variety of SKUs. What I found is even with having 30, 40, 50, whatever amount of SKUs, a repricer, especially if you use one of the more cost-effective ones that are here, Be Cool, AppEagle, like those are the ones I'm talking about, will pay you dividends even if with a small SKU count. I mean, I started using AppEagle, which we currently still use today, but I started using that when we had, I think, 57 SKUs. And it wasn't until I realized, obviously, the amount of sales I was doing per day increased, but it wasn't until I looked at the dashboard and realized that my pricing was being adjusted over 3,200 sometimes a day, which made me realize, okay, there's absolutely no way I can do this manually and still meet what this is doing for the $100 and some a month. So I just tell you that just as a point to tell you that if you're in those shoes, because I was there, think about that.
So one of the things people get asked a lot is, I heard that you can't make any good margins on wholesale. That is true if you look for 10 minutes. People are like, I tried wholesale once, I called like 10 people. And I'm like, so what'd you do after your first cup of coffee? like that is the beginning. That is like your warm-up calls, right? So you need to go through a lot of things to get the good margins, but good margins are available. I have several wholesale clients that are coaching clients that are doing over 70% ROI on all of their wholesale, and they are large sellers. They're not selling like $100, because it's easy to do like that for like $100 a month or something, right? But they're doing it at a large scale. So it is possible, but it is simple, but it's not easy because it's painful. It's like wholesale is the world's longest bag of microwave popcorn. When you're really hungry, or the movie's like getting ready to start and you're trying to hurry and you're watching it spin around, you're like, why is it not blowing up? I want the popcorn. All this energy is going in, but nothing's happening. Wholesale is like that. You have to plan on you putting in a lot of energy, and you're not going to see anything back for a while. But then pop, pop, pop. You get the first couple ones, and then the pops get closer together. So it's basically like moving people through a sales pipeline. And so in the beginning, you're not going to get to see a lot of results. But if you can be consistent and stop opening the microwave door and letting all the energy out, then you're going to be able to, it's going to kind of escalate like this, right? So
sometimes there's a risk reward with margin as well. Mm-hmm. So the example that I used earlier in the presentation when I talked about how I'll take products that have that really low margin, potentially even single digits, sometimes that can change over time. So in that particular instance, that was a product that I had bought, a deal that I bought directly from a manufacturer, that it was a product that they were discontinuing. So I didn't buy it from a liquidator or a closeout company. I bought it directly. It was just something that they were phasing out themselves. So it was, authentic source and all that. I purchased right around 55,000 pieces. And it was a take-all deal. It was take it all or nothing. Or he was going to sell it to somebody else. But when I bought it, it was $5 a unit. And at the time, there was 4 or 5 sellers on Amazon selling it, and the buy box was around $16, $17, sometimes as low as $14, depending on how competitive those other sellers got. So for a period, I was making next to no money, or potentially even losing $1 at a time. Fast forward, when all those other sellers who had a couple hundred pieces sold out, and we go into Q4, that item was ranked about 200 in toys, and I was selling that $5 product for 30. So you understand how that can change over time, especially when you do those opportunity buys or you really look at the potential, because I was okay with losing money initially for the first even few months, because now I'm still sitting on half that inventory and I've paid it off with dividends already. And this Q4 will set me up for the same kind of situation. But you've got to look sometimes beyond just the initial opportunity and look at the big picture.
And one of the biggest things that I think people don't do, that they're missing out on tons of money, is they'll run a price list once and then they'll never rerun that price list again. You want to rerun it about every 3 months, because sometimes they had a map violation problem, or like sometimes for products that are like at ASD, their price, if you look at their Keepa chart, it goes like boom, 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 right? Because all the people that placed these giant orders because it was their first wholesale thing, they tanked the price. And then, a couple people hold out. It took a little while. And then once it sells out, people are like, that product stinks. I'm not going to buy that again. And so then the price goes back up, because it's all about supply and demand, right? So going back to those, people say there's not enough products to buy. And when they find out that that I have family that's Chinese, that, is from China, they're like, why don't you must do all the private label. We have no private label. And even the people that worked in factories in China are like, oh, there's no way I would do private label. We've always been in a situation where we ran out of cash before we ran out of items to buy, but that's because we run a ton of data.
I think personally, if you are in a situation where you can't find enough products, I think you would probably agree that you're just not talking to enough vendors. Mm-hmm. There's just so many vendors out there, and yes, wholesale can be challenging at times if you're not doing the right approach and providing that value, but there's so many vendors you can at least have a conversation with and get enough to sustain your business.
Items can be bought cheaper doing RA. So a lot of people, you've been doing RA, you've been buying the clearance, and then you go to look for those same items on wholesale. You have to remember that when Walmart clearances something out, Walmart got a better wholesale price than you're ever going to get, because you are not Walmart, right? So they're going to get a discount, and then they're going to mark it down below, because getting that shelf space cleared up is way more important to them. Right? So if you try to take your same retail arbitrage product mix and just try to shove it into wholesale, it's going to seem like we're all just liars up here and nothing works, right? So you need to look for different items. The other thing to think about is you need an apples to apples relationship when you're looking at this. So how many of you would say that, if you had to hire somebody to source for you, you'd have to pay them probably at least $30 to $50 per hour? Really? More? How many are more? All right, y'all. You are way undervaluing yourself. When I was doing RA, I could spend $50,000 in a day with 2 people. So my hourly value, when you looked at the profits and stuff, was like $500 an hour. So my time is really important. So if you could go get a job at In-N-Out for $10, right? And so you just say, well, if I have to go to all of the Who's What's It stores in the area, and that will to get a month's worth of units, it's going to take me 8 hours, then at least add $80 in there for labor, right? You know that your time is worth more than that, but at least add what you got paid at your last job or what you could get paid at your next job as your hourly value. And you need to consider the labor cost and the time. Also the bagging and the taking the stickers off. You need to calculate that too. Because the one thing, there's 2 places where people get stuck, and that's time and capital. And so wholesale in the beginning is very time intensive, but after that, if the reason that we're able to do all the other things that we do is because wholesale is so much more scalable and frees up so much of your time. After about 6 months of working so hard, you think that if you see another spreadsheet, you will actually die.
I mean, I'm in a similar boat to a lot of people who started or currently still do RA. We started our business with RA. We built that into a $6 and then just over $1 million business by the time we stopped doing RA and went into wholesale. But you got to look at, again, the scalability. So if I use these glasses as an example of comparing RA to wholesale, right? You might find these glasses for $20 at RA and you can sell them for $100, right? And if you bought the same glasses wholesale, it might cost you $50. So you're going to pay $30 more. But in RA, if you could only find 6, and then in wholesale I could buy 600, you're going to make far more money this way. So it makes more sense. So you got to think about, RA. I mean, you're basically at the mercy of what you can find in the store, which is fine. People do it quite well. I'm not saying it's a bad model. I'm just telling you that if you want to really scale and have that replenishment, that product replenishable at all times, and really build that relationship, it's a good thing to look into.
And RA, I think, is a great model. I think PL can be a great model done right, as long as you're being safe and you're thinking about bringing actual value to the marketplace. Then both of those things can be be really great models. Private label, people will say, well, if I was a real professional, if I was one of the cool kids, I would do private label, right? So if you're thinking you want to go into private label and you have less than $5,000 to $10,000, I think you should really start out in wholesale. Pick a niche that you think you might want to have your private label product in, and pick some companies that you think are, not well represented or not on Amazon at all, and work on launching their products where you don't have to front the inventory cost as much, because you don't have to buy an entire truckload. See if you're actually able to do what you think you are able to do first. The other thing about that private label versus wholesale is so wholesale is a little bit more cash intensive than RA and OA, and obviously books is the least capital intensive, right? But private label takes a lot more capital because you have to buy sometimes 6 months worth of inventory at a time. Now sometimes it's 3, sometimes depending on the product it can be shorter. But you're having to buy in a bigger amount. So I actually have a lot of people who've done really well in private label come back to me and say they want to learn wholesale because they need to keep the cash moving in their business. So there are pros and cons to everything. If you're really good at executing and marketing, then yeah, you might do really, really well in private label. If you don't like any of those things, you don't like, dealing with, safety testing and all of that stuff, then you should probably work with really reputable wholesale companies.
So I almost view my business today as a, for lack of a better term, a version of private label, just because of the brands that I work with. So I've molded my business today to working, exclusively in a lot of cases, and if not semi-exclusively, with the brands that we work with on really taking their brands to the next level and really increasing the traffic and amount of conversions and sales that they obtain for their product. So while it's not my own brand, I'm still doing a lot of the same stuff that I would do if it was my own brand for the brands that I work with. So I'm very familiar with what it takes and what the private label guys are doing, because I'm basically doing that for the brands I'm representing. So I almost consider it a little bit of an overlap.
So you don't need a warehouse to do private or to do wholesale. You can have things processed by a prep center, but you have to factor that into your costs. The other option is to have them come to your home, or to what my stepmom does is she's negotiated with a local courier company for them to receive her pallets. She is a great negotiator for like $10. They receive her pallets, and then she goes with the truck, and then she goes picks them up, right? So because she can break down the pallets and put it in her car. So, you don't always, there are other ways to do this besides having a warehouse. So you don't have to have a warehouse. I'm fine using a prep center for wholesale. I would not use a prep center personally for RA because there's just a lot more room for error.
Yeah, and it also depends for wholesale in terms of your volume. Like for me, because of the inventory that we sell through, a prep center would cost me a fortune. I have 2 warehouses that we stock all of our products in, but that's just because of the volume we have. It wouldn't be cost effective for me to have a prep center.
So wholesale takes more time than RA. The first 6 months, it definitely does. But after that, it's so much faster. So so when I was just doing RA, I was spending, somewhere between 8 and 32 hours scanning in stores a week, right? So we got it to the point where I was able to, like in the sourcing area of my business, I was doing less than 4 hours a month. And everything, we had VAs running some other things, right? But since it's more systemized and it doesn't require a location-based, and it doesn't require somebody who knows how to run tactical arbitrage and all these other things, for me, it's a much more time-efficient sourcing method. And I can rerun those lists over and over again, right? Did you want to add on that?
Nope, you're covered. I think the only thing I would really add to it, if I had to put anything on there, is really that in terms of taking more time, I disagree with that. I remember when I did RA, I was traveling the country. I was doing that travel traj, as you like to call it, and just exhausted. I remember in Q4, all the stores had longer hours, and I was starting at 7 a.m. and wasn't finishing until 11 p.m. or 12 midnight, and then doing it all again, and it was just exhausting. Not to say that I'm not tired in wholesale in the busy times, but that was a long day.
Oh, I remember sending 50 boxes out in hotel rooms, and they'd be like, can I get a bell cart? And they're like, how many boxes? I was like, 54? And they're like, what? Like, I just needed to go down to the dock though, so it's okay.
We would send pallets back from our hotels. Like I would fill a semi or half a truck because we would just hit RA very hard on a course of a weekend or 3 or 4 days. And my questions to the hotel were, "Hi, do you have a loading dock I can receive my pallets?" Like what? So that was always fun.
So you started to, like on our routes, that we were digressing, we should not. Okay, so to do it with my model, you need the ability and patience to start the data. Here's where the biggest mistakes I see people make is they try to bring their retail and do wholesale, and then they don't understand that you have to go through massive amounts of data. Because the first the couple companies that you call, the first couple hundred companies you call, you're not going to be good at this yet, right? So I tell people who are new, plan to call 100 qualified companies. So what we do is we have in our academy, we have like a 4-step disqualification process. And it's like, can I sell it on Amazon? Is the MSRP higher than it on Amazon or equal to there? With sales, number of sellers, we look at a couple things, right? So you might need to look at 300 companies to get 100 qualified companies. And then you're gonna call and email. So if you're sending one email, that's not enough. And if you're sending your email from crazylady@aol.com, they're not going to take you very seriously if you're like, I'm an e-commerce master, I just happen to use AOL. So you need to have some of those things. You need to be able to present yourself as a professional and consistently go through the data. So I recommend 100 qualified vendors that you contact every week, and your goal is to bring on 1 to 2 new vendors to test every Amazon payout. Now you might, and as you keep doing this, you're going to get better at it. So your averages are going to get better to the point where you're going to be like, all right, I know that if I call 57 about 60 of these wholesale vendors, then I know that I'm going to get at least one account, and that makes it a lot easier to pick up the phone and make those calls because you now have like the law of averages. If I just make enough calls, I know it's going to provide a predictable result. But you have to be willing to commit to that for at least 3 months. And so anybody who tries to sell you a wholesale course and tells you, like, you'll make your money back in 30 days, they are liars. You will not make your money back in 30 days. Because even if I found, if the first list you ran was profitable and ready to test order, you place it, they ship it. Then, so that's 7 days. Then you turn it around, that's maybe another day, so we're on day 8. You send it to Amazon, that's another 10 days, right? Then it has to sell, and then you have to go into your payout. So it's not mathematically possible to get your money back in 30 days, right?
Think about that when you are evaluating what you're going to use for payment on products, because, for example, we just started working with one of our distributors who offers net terms and gave us a decent line of credit, but they said net 14. Well, net 14, I mean, it's going to take 3 days for me to get it, like Robyn said, and then go to Amazon. By the time I get paid, it's net 30-ish. So think about that too.
So I'm going to speed through this one, and then we'll speed through yours.
Yep.
Okay. So you can start with as little as $500. If you're going to start with $500, I'd recommend getting in groceries if you're already ungated in groceries. Grocery has low orders levels, and it shows that sell to like boutique stores. Because those little mom and pop stores, the vendors that are there are used to placing smaller orders. You need to develop a thick skin. They're never saying no to you. They're saying no to the experience that they had with another wholesale. Their experience, sometimes they'll say no because their friend told them that their cousin's dog lost their house because they sold on Amazon, right? They're not, so it's not about you have to be willing to face that rejection and just keep getting better over time. Both of us really feel that you have to provide value. So when I will walk through the entire show, gathering as many price lists as I can. I send them all to my VA that night. I have them go through those, and then the ones that are good, I will go through their listings. I'll print out one of their listings, and I'll circle the things that I think need to be fixed. And I'll say, even if you say no to me, these are the things that you should have your Amazon people do, right? So when they say, I already have an Amazon seller, you go, that is so good, because I just wanted to mention these are a couple things that I just noticed, and I'm sure that this is so egregious, I'm sure have brought it up to you. You slide it across the table. And then you go, if you need me, let me know. I've had companies call me up to 6 months later. So, that's one of the things that we do. We always bring value, even if I might not make money off that item. So you know who manufacturers know? Other manufacturers. So even if they can't work with you, you can follow with them. So you can read this slide you probably already have and move on to Eddie.
So I have some similarities with Robyn. As I mentioned, I'm going to start with that point on the bottom. There are certain things that we do agree on, ironically, but there's some key differentiators for our business as well. So my business, I focus very heavily on in-person meetings. I don't like the email and phone necessarily just to build the meat and bones of the relationship. I'll start with that, but I really want to meet someone in person. Usually at trade shows. If not, I'll go out to their location if they're easily accessible by car or plane. I'm in the air half my life anyway. I leverage vendor reps to manage multiple relationships under one roof. So what I mean by that is when I go to a trade show, I'll meet with individual vendors, of course, but I like working with my vendor reps who may represent 50 lines at a particular show, and 10 of them might be brands that I already work with. So I have a single point of contact for that brand. It's not costing me any more money because the brand is paying them their commission, so it's not like it's extra for me. But they can be my liaison for those 10 people. So it's a lot less work that I have to deal with myself, and they know the brand most likely a lot better than I do. So it's a kind of a win-win. I prefer having a warehouse just because of the volume that I've scaled to and just the overall cost. It is cheaper than a prep center in my personal opinion. The labor that you can get in your own warehouse, I just feel that a prep center is not going to be able to beat it. But you can do a prep center at a minimum, like we were saying earlier, if you don't have a warehouse physically available to you. Understanding the FOB China advantages, what I mean by that is because I do buy in a large volume, I a lot of times will buy directly from my manufacturer or brand owner. I'll still pay them directly, but I'm picking up the product from their factory in China. So instead of picking up from their domestic warehouse here and shipping it to my location, I'm picking it up right off the assembly line, and usually in that particular case, it's called FOB pricing. I can save anywhere from 20 to up close to 40% off of what I would normally pay. Because it's significantly discounted when you're saving them that cost of importing it into the country.
Can I clarify something real quick?
Yes.
That he is ordering from the U.S. manufacturer.
Yep.
Anything on Alibaba, AliExpress that has a brand, that is counterfeit. I promise you. Yep. He is not doing that. So just to be clear, he's ordering it from the U.S. company, but he's basically working directly with who's making the product to have it shipped here.
If I'm buying Fisher-Price, I'm still paying Fisher-Price. Mm-hmm. I'm just picking it up different location. That's the only difference, and I'm buying a lot larger of a volume. I do leverage various forms of capital based on the situation that I'm working with. So it could be if I'm depending on what I have, I might use a credit card. I might use something like Amazon Lending. I might use something like Cabbage or Funding Circle, or all options that are available to sellers depending on how much money you need and over what period of time. Short-term lending is something like a credit card or even a Cabbage. It can be short-term loans. You can use, Funding Circle is another option that can do loans of 3 to 5 years. Then you can look into things like SBA loans as well that are much longer. So it depends on the opportunity.
So we have about 3 minutes for questions, but I know there's more than 3 minutes of questions. So we will hang out here and answer as many questions as you can. Once we get to the end where we let the people who really want to go to lunch right away go, then I'm going to ask general questions before you ask us specifically about your one vendor that nobody is going to apply to anybody else, okay? So the first couple questions, let's keep it to questions that are going to apply to the masses. So who has their first question? Yes.
Right now, for us doing wholesale, we have wholesalers, and that's a pain in the butt. Nobody likes that. And you guys sound like you work directly with the brands, and you are essentially the wholesalers. Obviously, Eddie has the ability to go to Fisher-Price, and that you take smaller brands. How do you search for those smaller brands? Is it just like word of mouth? What are let's say 3 to 5 ways that you get this data to search for what brands do I need to use?
Yeah, so I do 3 different ways. I think Eddie's primarily 1.5 way. So the first way is I will actually go to the show, walk the floor, because there's some things you don't see that niche product because it's a new to the line or whatever until you're at the show. The other thing I'll do is a trade show, no show, where I'll register for the show even if I know I can't go to it, and I will farm that list and use it like a lead list. The third way is that I will start in a niche, so I will look somebody was telling me that there was a certain kind of a certain kind of exercise, let's just say it was CrossFit, there was a certain kind of tape that they were having trouble finding, and I was like, really? Tell me more about this tape, right? And so I would start at something super highly niched, and then I would look at customers who viewed this, also viewed that, and I don't do any research on it. I just start writing the names of the companies, And so then I make a list of maybe 400 companies, and then I have my VAs go through the process of disqualification and those things. Okay. Yes.
Other question in the back.
Thanks for putting up with the microphone, guys, just so we can get it on the video.
My question is, sounds like you guys are managing that relationship with different vendors. So I was wondering, like, what kind of software, or what kind of tools you guys are using for that customer relationship management?
I'll go first. So, yeah. All right. So I use Asana. So when I do that lead list, we do it in Excel, the ones that meet the disqualification process. In Asana, you could do it in Trello. So imagine there's columns with the cards, right? And so on the cards, I have, like, at the top, I have, like, contacting phase, or, analyzation phase, test, buy, reorder, right? And so we will actually put in each company is its own task. And so I put, like, email sent on this date, phone call made on this date, talk to Susie, she has a schnauzer, and I keep all of the notes in there, right? And then so I move it through that process. So I can see exactly how many new leads we have, how many companies we're analyzing, how many custom companies we're currently testing, and how many are on our current reorder list.
So for me, I'll mimic that. I use Asana and Trello before, and I'm to varying degrees. I still use it today. I also use a program called If This Then That, which I feel like is very beneficial because it's basically can streamline your process in terms of if something happens, then it automatically does something else to it. So you don't have to manually walk through that process. But for me, the main system we use is custom built software, just because we have so many multi-channel areas that we sell through that it's impossible to have one software that fits all of our needs because we're very diverse. So we kind of built our own for that.
One of the things I would recommend if you're getting started to just is avoid the large catalogs in the beginning and the big distributors. The only time I ever really use a distributor is in the food industry. But for the most part, I would stay away from those because you can get sucked into those for months and not get results. What's the next question?
Let's take one more before we'll actually officially break for lunch, but we'll again stay.
We'll stay as long as
later,
you
yeah.
need. Reasonably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where would you suggest we start on learning how to optimize listings for wholesale?
There's this lady that has this academy that we do have training on that. The other place that unstoppable.academy. If you go to bestfromthenest.com/academy, there's information there. But I'm not here to sell things, so let's talk about all the other ways you could do that. So Amazon has a YouTube channel called Amazon Seller Education. That has a lot of things on flat files about Amazon SEO, reading the help documents. I know it sounds novel, but there is some good information in there. Watching, get in a couple Facebook groups. If you want to really learn to optimize listings, some of the private label groups can be really good because they only have one product line, so they get really obsessive about that one product. And so you can kind of take their obsession and harvest it towards, more general things with you.
In addition to watching the Amazon YouTube channels and the videos they have, Amazon has like a sponsored products and advertising team that they literally pay people to help sellers all day, every day. I can't remember what it's called, but there's a variety of programs that they can offer, and you can actually reach out to the sponsored products team to get help with your individual case. But we were reached out to by that specific team themselves like 3 years ago for the first time during Q4, and they said, "Hey, we'll basically optimize your PPC campaigns, and we'll make it more efficient for you." They brought my ACoS down to 3.5% and an extra around 100K in revenue for Q4 during that time period. So don't underestimate that you can go straight to the source to get a lot of those help. That a lot of the help with the software and the system that they've developed. I mean, they'll help you directly.
So you can reach us here. I don't have business cards, so if you want my information, take a photo of that, and then you won't lose it 5 minutes from now anyway. So it's bonus.
Yeah, I have cards if you guys want them. Otherwise, of course, you can take that as well. But if you want my card specifically, come see me at the front.
All right, so if you want to run to lunch, run away, and then we'll give you 30 seconds to get out of here, and then we're gonna know.
Yeah.
We'll give you a couple seconds for people who want to leave, and then we'll answer some general questions, then we'll answer one-on-one questions.
Thanks, guys, for coming.
Thank you.